Good evening to everyone. This is one of our next webinar within the project Beyond Life, and I want to thank you, all of you, to join the webinar, especially to Mariam. She's a journalist, she's an activist, Lebanese, but from Copenhagen, and right now in Beirut. And welcome, Mariam, and the webinar is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me well? Okay,
Perfect.
great. We're going to start. No, first, I want to tell you who I am. My name is Mariam. I am Lebanese, and I am a journalist and a project coordinator. And I work for activism and uh, advocacy journalism. And I think everyone knows that this is being recorded, right? Just so y'all know. And we're going to talk today about a very interesting topic. I'm going to share my screen real quick so everyone can see. Oh, okay. Great. Can everyone see the presentation slides? Is anyone here? Can anyone just like raise a... Okay, great. Great, thanks. All right. Okay, so the topic we're going to talk about today is speech on trial, freedom, hate, and global controversies. Okay, so why it's important that we talk about um, freedom of speech and hate speech nowadays is because obviously there's a lot going on in the world, and it's very, very important that people follow up on what's happening. And because we're living in such a polarized society, the topic of freedom of speech and the topic of hate speech has become very, very popular nowadays. And people are more specific about how we use the terms and how we identify words and the terms. All right. So this is what today's webinar is going to be about. First, we're going to do an introduction on why hate speech and freedom and free speech matters today, the definitions of what they are. We're going to give some examples of some case studies, examples of hate speech. And we're going to talk about hate speech and freedom of speech on social media and how the moderation process is going. And we're going to talk about some global contradictions, and we're going to have a small discussion about what we've already been talking about, and some key takeaways and closing session. So the core questions for this webinar is, where do we draw the line between free speech and hate speech? It's like a very, I know you've probably all heard the question before, but it's actually a question that even today, I still don't know exactly where the line is, because there's so many factors that rely on there's so many factors that affect this line of where that splits freedom of speech and hate speech. So we're going to dig more into that. And the second question, who gets to decide what counts as harmful? How do global contexts shape these boundaries? Does anyone have any idea of any of the answers to these questions? Anyone would like to share like initial ideas of where the line is between hate speech and freedom of speech? No? That's also okay. We'll continue. So, hate speech by definition, by the definition of the UN, that was issued in 2029, is any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses discriminatory language against a person or group based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factors. So hate speech is not just someone saying something offensive. Like if someone's calling you stupid, that's not necessarily hate speech by this definition, because hate speech needs to inflict harm, hostility, discrimination, or violence. One of them mentioned. And hate speech is not just, even though it's called hate speech, so you would assume that it's something that you say, but it's also something that you might write, something, an act you might behave with, or an action that you might incite, or a banner that you might write, or a painting that you might draw. So hate speech can be in any kind of form, and it is also targeted or based on different things like religion, ethnicity, nationality. So not necessarily only, because I think the very mainstream hate speech or ideas of hate speech is usually related to racism or gender, religion, but there are many other forms of hate speech that are pretty common nowadays. Oh, did someone share something? No? Okay, let's continue. So, some examples of hate speech: racial slurs, incitement against religious groups, calls for violence. You all know what these are. And now we're going to give more examples of what hate speech could look like, and how it's become very vague what hate speech is and what it's not nowadays, and how polarized it is, actually, even though some things are really clear, but to some people, or to some governments, or to some, in some contexts, hate speech might differ. So, does everyone have a clear idea of what hate speech is? I'm guessing yes, so we're going to continue. So, freedom of speech. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights has a very clear definition of what freedom of speech is that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion, expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, and seek and receive and impart information and ideas through any media, and regardless of frontiers. For me, it's a very vague definition, but it also includes the main ideas of what protects your right of speech. As for the United States, they have the First Amendment. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, that protects speech very broadly, including speech many might find offensive. And it only restricts speech that incites imminent lawless action or true threats. So in the United States, your First Amendment, you can basically say whatever you want, as long as you're not going against the law or like actually threatening someone, which is a very wide a definition, or a very wide right of freedom of speech, which many people agree with and many think is a bit too much. As for a European perspective, since freedom of speech changes according to which country you're in, what laws they have around freedom of speech. So in the European perspective, freedom of expression is balanced with human dignity and equality. Some speech, like Holocaust denial, is illegal due to historical and societal harm. So it's kind of contextual. So depending on the context. So let's say the Holocaust denial is not a thing in the United States, but it is in Europe because it happened in Europe, and so on. So the key points are that free speech protects ideas, even unpopular or controversial ones. I mean, it's a right that we all. It's a very important right that we have and that we should have. It protects our ideas. It protects our freedom of expression, our freedom of actually being free to say what you want to say, what you believe in. It's one of the most important rights that we have as humans, I think. And and limitations vary depending on law, culture, and context. So in some countries, freedom of speech and hate speech are different from other countries, depending on the form of government that they have, depending on how religion is affected in the society, and depending on the economic and military situation, depending on many things, and on culture, on context. Some things can be said in some places and can't be said in other places, not just by law, but by societal norms. So that is freedom of speech. The tension. So, to sum up, freedom of speech protects dissent, political ideas, and minority voices. Hate speech laws protect vulnerable groups and prevent violence. So, what are the key challenges in this discussion? Political slogans, protests often fall in a gray zone. So, if I'm protesting for anything, it could be political. It could also be anything else. But I think political is more frequent. That you have this gray zone. Who gets to say if this is hate speech or freedom of speech? Context, history, and power dynamics shape whether speech is seen as harmful. So depending on where, depending on how, and depending on who. So over policing can silence legitimate political expression. Under policing can allow real harm. So if there's too much censorship, then the political expression is basically taken away from us at some point. And if there's no policing at all, then some people can get hurt through hate speech. Things could get out of control. So how do we kind of set the balance? How do we balance between the two? Who decides what counts as hate speech? Who decides? Is it me and you? Is it the government? Is it the law? Is it the European Union? Is it Meta? Who decides? And should context, intention, or impact matter most? Does anyone have any idea or can guess? Or what do you guys believe matters most when it comes to hate speech and freedom of speech? Is it the context in which the thing is being said or done? Is it the intention behind the person that is saying it or doing it? Or is it the impact that it's having after the person did or said something? Would anyone like to share?
I write in the chat that I have no idea, but I hope Meta doesn't.
Yeah, me too. Okay. So
I would say the impact. Sorry, I didn't present myself. So I'm Diogo, the guy on that photo, and I would say the impact, because everything we say is political. So depending on the context we say, also, it might produce really bad events. But it depends on how you say it and the context you say it. So I would say the impact. It's one of the main things for me, at least.
mm-hmm. I agree. I think the impact is the real thing that's happening, the real effect of what you're saying. So I think all of the three are equally important, but I agree that the impact is maybe the most rigid thing, that it's the real outcome that we see after.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give some case studies about 3 case studies actually. I will start with case study 1, which is Free Palestine. So as we know, it's a very controversial topic. No, it's not. It's a very clear topic, and it's very obvious what's happening in Palestine today. And it's it's horrible. There's a genocide, and I'm not going to go into that, but just a little background. So a lot of people who support the freedom of Palestine, they call for justice. They call for the liberation of the country. They call for the end of the apartheid. They call for the end of the genocide. They use these terms because words matter. So their point of view is that by saying Free Palestine, this slogan, it is a call for justice, a call for human rights, and a call for self-determination. However, on the other hand, some people who are critical around the slogan of Free Palestine, they perceive it as anti-Semitic, the denial of Israel's right to exist. So in this discussion, we have two sides: people calling for the freedom of Palestine because they're human beings, that their land have been taken from them. They call for them to be freed from terrorism and so on. And then there's someone on the other side who's saying that saying Free Palestine is perceived as anti-Semitic. I guess everyone is aware about what anti-Semitic means, which is hate towards Jewish people and the denial of Israel's right to exist. So an example is Germany, 2023 and 2024 and today. Pro-Palestine rallies are banned, and protesters are being beaten on the streets. And I'm sure you all see these videos because they're very widely spread as much as the algorithm allows. And why does the government in Germany think that saying Free Palestine incites anti-Semitic risks? So in this case, it's Germany, and Germany has a history in because even the term anti-Semitic or anti-Semitism, it emerged during the World War II and the Nazi Jew War, and there was a lot of hate on Jewish people and so on. So in this case, the context and history of Germany has a big effect of why they would call Free Palestine as hate speech, or ban it, like legally ban having Palestinian flags. So then you might ask yourself, okay, where's the freedom of expression? I mean, I'm an activist, or not just an activist. Let's say I'm just a normal student, and I think what's happening in Palestine is super bad, and I want to go on the street and I want to express these feelings that I have, but I'm not allowed to. So is my freedom of expression here taken from me? And what about the Jewish people in Germany? Might they feel unsafe with this, with these protests? Would they feel unsafe with I don't know, with the word Free Palestine, or some Israelis maybe in Germany? So these are the questions that you might ask yourself when you are thinking about the line that splits hate speech from freedom of speech. Another example is that in the US, there are some campuses in universities that say Free Palestine creates unsafe spaces for Jewish students. So how can we protect these students' freedom of speech? So how are they supposed to express their freedom of speech? By expressing their frustration in what's happening in Palestine, but at the same time having to deal with administration and law and a lot of difficulties that is kind of pushing them into silencing them due to having other Jewish people feeling unsafe at the campus. So I would say that it's very political. I would say in these two cases of Germany and the United States, I would say it's not really about the impact. I don't think that saying Free Palestine creates unsafe spaces for Jewish students, especially because what's happening in Palestine has nothing to do with religion. So I would say it's purely political, because the United States is complicit in the genocide and Germany is complicit in the genocide. So for political reasons, these two countries, or this slogan is not cool in these two countries, because it doesn't work with us politically. That's how these governments think about it. I want to give you a personal example that I had when I was in Copenhagen. I was in, I don't know if someone knows Tivoli. It's like this big amusement park in Copenhagen. And one of my friends was wearing a Free Palestine t-shirt and was kicked out of the amusement park because the guard said you're not allowed to have any political, I don't know, merch. So no politics in the amusement park, no political expressions. But at the same time, it was during the elections, the American elections, there was some people who were wearing "Vote for Kamala Harris" t-shirts. And the Danish guards didn't seem to have any problem with those. So where's the line? Is it the mood of the guard or his personal perspectives? Is it depending on the country? Is it because Palestine is, I don't know, Middle East? US is, I don't know, is it third world, second world, first world countries? Is that what it is? Is it politics? So those are the questions I want you to ask yourselves when you're thinking about what separates hate speech from political slogans. So these are political slogans that people are considering hate speech, and it depends on very much on the politics and on the history of the place it's being said. So that's like kind of the case study to show that it's about, these are the things to take into consideration: the politics of the country and the thing that is being said. So the context, the history, and of course the people in power. The third example is Meta. So users report takedowns of Free Palestine posts for hate speech. So I don't know if some of you have experienced it, but I have, and many of the people I know have. When you share about what's happening in Palestine, you share about children being killed and just horrendous things, like things that are actually happening, like that are happening to nowadays in 2025, like real slaughter and murder, and words that maybe is not the best words to use in a webinar, but are words that need to be said, and words that need to, and videos that people need to watch, and realities that people need to open their eyes on. So when you share this stuff, users, you can get banned on Instagram. Your post can be taken down. It's happened to me, I think, more than 30 times, where it's reported as hate speech. But how? If you're writing Free Palestine on a post that shows horrendous things that are happening in Palestine, why would that be considered hate speech? And if that is so, if Meta, that is controlling what billions of people can say and not say, if they are the ones that decide what we can say, just imagine the structure of the system that we are living in. These are also things to take into consideration when thinking about our freedom of speech. How much freedom of speech do we actually have? If social media is supposed to be a platform where we can express ourselves, where we can say our opinions, where we can be ourselves and post what we feel, what we think, but how if it's being censored in the most political ways? So how much freedom of speech do we actually have on Instagram or on Facebook or on Meta? Does anyone want to share any experience they've had with this slogan? Has anyone ever experienced something like this? Or do you have any thoughts about the Free Palestine slogan and how that relates to freedom of speech, or how that is maybe hate speech to you? Anyone? Okay, that's fine. We can move on. All right. The second case study. I don't know if you all remember the Je suis Charlie incident that happened back in 2015. In case some of you don't know, but Charlie Hebdo is a French satire magazine. It is a magazine that is labeled as a extremist left-winged news magazine that that presents all kind of satire, and it criticizes a lot of things that people usually don't criticize through satire. And back in 2015, they published a series of cartoons that were presenting the Prophet Muhammad, who's the prophet, who's the main figure in Islamic religion. And these cartoons, they were very mocking and very disrespectful, and so on. So and then there was the slogan Je suis Charlie, which was a slogan that defended free expression. So in 2015, the magazine published this piece with these cartoons, very mocking, very like disrespectful, or whatever you want to call them, cartoons of the Prophet, who's a very important religious figure for a lot of Muslims. And the Muslims in France just gone crazy, all around the world actually. Even in Denmark when I was small, this is like 10 years ago, I remember that everyone was like, oh my God, did you see these pictures of this? Look at this. So a lot of Islamophobia happened in France during that time. And the slogan Je suis Charlie came out because, on the other hand, a lot of people in France and around the world, they said, no, like, this is freedom of expression. This is satire. This is a kind of art. I'm free to draw and paint and publish and express whatever I want. So in this case, where is the line between hate speech and freedom of speech? So a lot of Muslims were very offended with this. They thought it was disrespectful to them, to a person that for them is holy. And on the other hand, this is a magazine. They want to criticize everything. So why can't they not criticize Muhammad? So the critics, they saw that cartoons mocked Islam, so they called it Islamophobic hate speech. And the supporters, they defended the satire, the secularism, and freedom from censorship. So this is like a very clear example, actually, that came to my mind of how hate speech and freedom of speech can be this close sometimes. And depending on the context, on the history, and on the politics, always on the politics, this line can be drawn. So this is something to think about. Does anyone have any idea about what they think of these images that were published? Do you think that this is freedom of expression, that they should have the right to criticize any religion, any figure, any political party, anything that they want? Or it's Islamophobia and hate speech? Would anyone like to share?
I actually don't remember this case that you are pointing out, but I would say, like, on the topic of women wearing the hijab and everything, I feel like sometimes our European perspective and our values get in the way that we feel like we have the right to discriminate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's sometimes we as Europeans, and in our Eurocentral world, sometimes we feel like it's freedom of expression, but it's just blurred with hate speech, I would say.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting term you used, blurred, because it is somehow blurred. because for me, if I had to give my personal opinion in or comment on what you said, I think it's very true that there is just a loss of people trying to understand the
Yeah,
difference.
totally,
So
totally.
whoever's different from you, you try to understand why it's different and not be afraid of what's different and try to respect something even though you don't really understand it. But at the same time, what if don't they have the right to criticize whoever they want? That's like kind of the questions you have to ask yourself. So in this case of Islamophobia, there's a very clear line that was crossed because of this loss in understanding that this magazine or this community had in the Islamic culture before the Islamic religion, because some might say, yeah, but who cares? Some people walk on the street and it's written on their shirts, Jesus is gay, or it's written some kind of very comical thing about Jesus. Okay, and the Christians, they don't go crazy about it. Okay, but not all cultures of religions are the same. That's the point that's missing in this Je suis Charlie case, because even though some people view the some political figure or religious figure as relevant or irrelevant, some might see it as the most important thing in their lives, and that is, I think, where the line somehow becomes clear, that you need to do a bit more research before, because satire is a very sophisticated art, and either you have to do it very smart, very wisely, or don't do it, because it's a tricky art. It's a kind of art that it can, like, even if it's cinema or if it's art, painting, cartoon, wherever it is, it's very sensitive because it can draw on many different perspectives without taking into consideration others. So I think that's, in this case, a very good example of freedom of speech and hate speech. I'm going to move on to the next because I don't think we have that much time. Let me just check. Okay. So,
Can I add something?
yes.
But I would like to coming back to the first case.
Mm-hmm.
I just came to my mind that one of the European politicians from Spain, her name is Irene Montero, she was banned from the European camera just for wearing the Palestinian scarf. And I think this act is also, uh, related to what we are talking about, because why only showing your support with, with something that you are wearing, like a scarf, you are banned from this European camera. I was shocked with that. I don't know what is your opinion about this.
Well, like, for me, it's very clear. Like, the European Union is very complicit in what's happening in Palestine. It's just like the United States, because the European Union is also selling weapons to Israel at the moment. So it's not in their benefit that anyone supports Palestine, because then they would look like the bad guys, if I have to say it in a nice way. So it's very political. The reason is very political. It's nothing to do with their extra protection of the feelings of Jewish people, if I have to be very clear. I don't know if you agree, but that's just like as direct as it can be. Okay. I'm going to move on to Holocaust denial. This is a third example. So in Europe, France, Germany, Austria, it's illegal to deny the Holocaust, considered hate speech and incitement. Even though in the United States, it's protected speech under the First Amendment. So in the United States, you can easily deny that there was a Holocaust. So this is just an example of how the context or the country plays a very important role in what is considered hate speech. So maybe if the Holocaust had happened in the United States, it would have had similar laws to Europe, or the other way around. The fourth case study is the Black Lives Matter movement. So a lot of supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement, they consider that it is anti-racism. So the slogan or the term Black Lives Matter is anti-racism. It's demand for justice and equality. Some critics, on the other hand, label it as anti-police slogans, as hate speech against law enforcement. And internationally, Black Lives Matter protests are restricted in some countries since it's considered dangerous speech. And I don't want to go into like what countries and why, but if you can only imagine what countries and why, due to the history of the history of slavery, and to the history of imperialism and colonization. So I think it's very like clear what countries might not like for Black Lives Matter protests to be taking a lot of noise in the country and in the street, due to history, due to also complicity, just like in Palestine, just like in the Holocaust. So, social media and moderation. So, platform policies like Twitter, X, TikTok, they restrict hate speech, but enforcement is inconsistent. They can't come to your house and arrest. What they can do is restrict the hate speech within their platforms. And the Palestinian activists report censorship, while extreme hate speech often stays online. A lot of hate speech, very extreme hate speech is very present on social media. Forms of extreme bullying, forms of imperialistic language, forms of racist language that has become the norm nowadays. It's like there's a system that's trying to normalize a lot of very, very dark language. And it's not being censored online, but Free Palestine is censored, and a lot of other things are censored that are not. Yeah. Algorithms often silence marginalized voices. I think this sentence is very, very important. The way that algorithms function nowadays is that you all know how they function somehow, but there's a very precise system in which algorithms work, and in which the systems or the people behind algorithms, how it is a mixture of collecting people's data for monetary reasons and to silence a lot of marginalized voices. So maybe a post about Trump saying they ate the dogs or whatever. You remember the story about Haiti? That was trending like crazy, and everyone had it. And even though it was very racist towards a lot of people, but it trended, and millions and billions of views everywhere. The algorithm was just keeping it going. Although a lot of things like what's going on in Sudan, for example, what's going on in a lot of places in the world, they don't trend that much. Even here in Lebanon, like where I am currently, there's Israeli airstrikes almost every day, but the media says nothing about it. The algorithms don't push this kind of news forward. So algorithms often silence marginalized voices. They do, and not just in during genocides or during war, but also on issues of race, on issues of religion, and a lot of issues that people consider controversial. The algorithms often, I just want to make it clear that the algorithms are not random. they're not something that we make ourselves. It's something that is very, very well studied, and it's very political, unfortunately. And some might I'm giving conspiracy theories, but I'm not. This is the truth, and um, that's why it's very important that we try to algorithms very well, and so we can try and them to our benefit. And when it comes to hate speech or freedom of today and every day, and some are, I don't know, just any kind of political slogan, private companies or the capitalist system in which private companies have the authority to decide what millions can or cannot say is also a very important factor in distinguishing between hate speech and freedom of speech. So it depends on the company, the people behind the company, the people who are funding the company, the political opinions and political the politics of the company
Mariam, I'm so sorry, but
can actually decide what millions and billions of people can say online and cannot say. So that puts our freedom of speech in danger, and also protects hate speech, and also protects people from hate speech. But at the same time, just like we've been discussing, hate speech is not hate speech in all contexts and history, and it's not the same. Private companies decide what millions can or cannot say is also as important as the algorithm. It's something to make us think. Yes. Hello.
I was talking about because sometimes we lost you a bit.
Can you hear me? Can anyone
Now I think we do.
hear me?
Yeah, we can.
No. Hello. Can people hear me?
We can, but it's really unstable. Sometimes we can, other times we can't.
Did you miss a lot in what I was saying? I don't remember where it stopped. Can anyone?
You were talking about the algorithms.
I'm really sorry about this, but I'm currently in Lebanon now, and the reception is very, very bad. So is my voice clear now, or is it still like cutting off? Hello?
We can hear you, can hear you.
Okay, great. I just needed that little confirmation. Okay, so we were talking about how private companies are also a factor in what we decide, or what is decided, what is hate speech and freedom of speech. Since private companies they are part of this capitalist system that we live in that allow private companies to decide what we can or cannot say, what they consider hate speech and what they don't. So it depends on the company, the people behind the company, the people funding the company, the political opinions of the company. So, so, so also depending on the platform you are on, or the people behind that platform and their politics or their contexts and histories, will also define what is hate speech and what is freedom of speech. So, some global contradictions. Some slogans have different meanings depending on context. So, Free Palestine is hate speech in Germany, but it's political speech in South Africa, since the history and context of Germany and its relationship with Jewish people and the Jewish state, and political speech in South Africa. It's a beautiful speech. It's something people encourage because of the South African position on the genocide in Palestine. And Je suis Charlie is free speech in France, but to Muslims it's hate speech. So context, history, and power matter more than words alone. It depends on where you say what you say, who says what you say, who's saying this, and the politics of the place you are saying it in, and the military relations behind what you are saying, if in the case of Free Palestine, and the history of the place. So that was just like a summary of. So a little discussion prompt. If a student wears a shirt that says Free Palestine, is that political speech or hate speech? Does anyone want to share? Anyone?
For us, at least in Portugal, like you said, the context, I would say it's political speech.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just our context, I would say. But for some people, they might interpret as hate speech. So it depends on who's receiving also the message,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. But I think objectively in the law, it's political speech. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so people should be protected, should have the freedom to call for a free Palestine and not have been accused of anti-Semitism, because there's things that are not related to each other. Because the freedom of Palestine does not mean the inside. The next question was, if someone support all immigrants, is free speech? Because if people think Palestine means deport all Jews, just deport all immigrants. So is that hate of the country that I live in? The country that has many people population in the country was about 2 million Syrians that came, and there's been this huge fight between governments and veterans. They're taking our jobs, and they know. If I was to ask someone on the street, not everyone, but some people maybe, would you consider this free speech or hate speech? They would say it's free speech. They would say, we are a country who's going through war and economic crisis and inflation, and we don't have capacity for immigrants. Maybe this free speech. In other places, go and you ask, is that deport all immigrants? They might say, yeah, but you guys have money, you have a good economy. Why can you not host immigrants? And immigrants are working, and this is hate speech. So to answer this question would also depend on the context. To some people, the context, the country, the history, the politics, the situation that these immigrants are in, the country that is hosting them, who is saying it. Is it a neighbor? Is it a politician? Is it a, you know what I mean? To some people, it's such a big hate, like no discussion around it. Some people, it's free speech. So this was just two examples of how thin the line is between hate speech and free speech. So the key takeaways of this webinar is that hate speech is not just offensive speech. It's about incitement to harm. Hate speech is something that causes huge side effects. Hate speech is something that is very serious. It's something that is it's something that people should be very careful about, because hate speech doesn't just hurt feelings. Hate speech creates wars. It creates civil wars. At least here in the Middle East, I can give you so many examples of how hate speech has created a lot of civil wars, and it creates serious damage and damage. It creates a split in the society. It creates polarization. So it's much more than offensive speech. And freedom of speech is not absolute. So the people think that we here in Europe or whatever, we live in democracies, we can say whatever we want to say. Not really true. And what we want to say what we want to say on the street. Can we say what we want to say online? Depending the laws worldwide. So in the you can say something, you can't say something. In Europe, you can say some things, you can't say some things, and political slogans ones when it comes to speech and freedom of speech, because often the organization that people will never agree about what is hate speech and what is freedom of speech. The boundary between hate and freedom of speech is shaped by context, power, and history. So it's about the politics, it's about who's in power in the country, and the geopolitical relationships of the country and what is being said, and the history of the country, and the context. The context is also very, very important. So that was the webinar for today. I hope it was good for everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Any comments? Anything someone would like to correct me with? Someone would like to ask, clarify, or anything like this? I hope this was a wake-up call for you and for me and for the people you might talk about this to, that it's very important that we think about what we say, where we say it, because the words can damage, actions can damage. We should be intentional about what we do, especially in the time that we live in right now, where there's genocides going on around the world, and they're being live streamed. And don't be afraid to call for justice and call for the liberation of humanity from all of these systems that we live in. And yeah, thank you all very much for sticking around. And if no one wants to say anything, does anyone want to share anything? You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can. I
Okay,
was I was going to ask you, what do you think it's the path we are going? What do you think, like, moderation will win at a certain point? Like, I don't know, I feel kind of lost with this polarization right now that we are feeling. And
did you say moderation?
yeah, like the middle, the in between, like, where do you feel that we can establish a point where we respect human rights? And because because it's kind of weird times that we are living.
Yes, it's definitely weird times, but at the same time, it's not. At the same time, things aren't that complicated as the media tries to make it look like it is. And sometimes, at least for me, the truth sometimes is very clear. And all we have to do is read and make ourselves very aware about things that are happening around us, and not just the society that we come from or the context of the place we live in. But it's very important to read beyond your borders, like they say, because I mean, I think we are, as much as I understand what you mean, that we're in complex times, but we're also going back to basics. It's like today for me is like a power between what's good and what's evil. Where humanity is, like it's a fight for humanity, and not just when it comes to war and genocide, but when it comes to everything, to social media, to technology, to how much we are able to think alone by ourselves. It's a really a fight for humanity. I don't know if that answered your question, but I also don't have the answers, but this is always what I think when I think to myself about these things. That it's not complicated. Sometimes the truth is very clear, but there's a lot of people that are trying to hide it. It's just like being a bit more focused, and we're so stimulated all the time and overstimulated that it's hard for us to think clearly and focus on what's right and what's wrong. And yeah, thank you guys for today. Is there any other questions or comments or anything anyone would like to share? Okay. If not, thank you, Diogo, for your interactions. That was really nice. And to everyone who was here. So I'm just gonna shut down this webinar for today, and I wish you all a very nice week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.